Hello everyone, myself Himani Bhatnagar, practicing advocate in Delhi. Today I am going to deal with very important topic which is very common nowadays during COVID-19, domestic violence. As you all know, domestic violence has been an age-old societal concern and women at home have been tormented and tortured by her own family members since time immemorial. However, a special legislation addressing this issue was formulated by the Act of Parliament only in the year 2005, which is known as Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005. The scope of this piece of legislation has been expounded in plethora of judgments by the High Courts and the Supreme Court of India. The origin of this act lies in Article 15 Clause 3 of the Constitution of India, which clearly says that state can make special provisions for women and children towards realizing the right to equality. This indicates the use of affirmative action to remedy a wrong. It is often said that India has several laws, but they are not implemented. The problem, however, is not the lack of implementation, but the lack of mechanism by which it can be implemented. Women have insufficient understanding of the law and lack of access to the courts. However, it is necessary not only to enact a law, but to provide the necessary infrastructural tools with which a woman can access the law. The way of doing this is to put a mechanism in place in the law itself. In this act, this has been done by creating the Office of the Protection Officer and recognizing the role of the service providers. Affirmative duties have been imposed on the government to provide legal aid, medical facilities, and shelter homes in the hope that women in distress be given all these facilities. The act is a statement of commitment by the state that domestic violence will not be tolerated. Now, we start dealing with the definition of domestic violence. What does domestic violence means? The act itself defines the meaning of domestic violence for the first time in Indian law. It is a comprehensive definition and captures women's experience of abuse and includes not only physical violence but also other forms of violence such as emotional, verbal, sexual, and economic abuse. The Act does not make any changes in the existing personal law regime on family matters. The reliefs under this Act are in addition to the existing laws and have been recognized with the objective of empowering a woman to tide over an emergency situation. Having obtained relief under the law, a woman can still go for relief under other laws. The Supreme Court of India has made significant observation in a recent judgment in 2019 in the case P. Rajkumar and another versus Yoga Lakshmi, wherein it has been held that the relief taken under domestic violence and under Section 125 of CRPC both are independent proceedings. Gujarat High Court in the year 2018 in Bhartiben Bipinbhai Tamboli versus State of Gujarat has observed that the object and purport of Domestic Violence Act is the protection of women from violence inflicted by a man and or a woman. It is a progressive act whose sole intention is to protect the woman irrespective of the relationship she shares with the respondent. The definition of an aggrieved person under this act is so wide that it takes within its purview even a woman who are living with their partners in a live-in relationship. I shall be discussing the live-in relationship later in my discussion. Further, this court has further observed that in the context of proceedings under this act against mother-in-law, the court relied on plethora of cases and opined that in the Domestic Violence Act 2005, the definition of respondent must be read with its proviso to give a logical meaning to the definition of respondent. By the Supreme Court also in the case of Sandhya Wankhede versus Manoj Bhimrao in 2011, the court has observed that the proviso to Section 2 Clause Q, which defines the definition of respondent, does not exclude female relatives of the husband or make partner from the ambit of a complaint that can be made under the provision of Domestic Violence Act. Therefore, complaints are not just maintainable against the adult male person, but also the female relatives of such adult male. Now the question arises, who can file a complaint under the Domestic Violence Act? For this, Section 2 Clause A of the Act defines aggrieved person. An aggrieved person can file a complaint under the Domestic Violence Act. So what is aggrieved person? Whom we call an aggrieved person? It is any woman who is or has been in a domestic relationship with the respondent and who alleges to have been subjected to any act of domestic violence is by the respondent is termed as aggrieved person. The Domestic Violence Act not only covers those women who are or have been in a relationship with the respondent, but it also covers those women who have lived together in a shared household. Now, what does shared household means? Section 2 Clause S of this Act defines very clearly what is shared household. It means where the person aggrieved lives or at any stage had lived in a domestic relationship either singly or along with the respondent, and includes such a household whether owned or tenanted either jointly by the aggrieved person and the respondent, or owned or tenanted by either of them, in respect of which either the aggrieved person or the respondent by both jointly or singly have any right, title, interest or equity, and includes such a household which may belong to the joint family of which the respondent is a member, irrespective of whether the respondent or the aggrieved person has any right, title in the shared household. In the case of S.R. Batra versus another versus Srimati Taruna Batra in 2007, the Supreme Court, with reference to this definition of shared household, had stated that the definition of shared household is not very happily worded and appears to be the result of clumsy drafting, requires to be interpreted in a very sensible manner. And further, it has held that according to Section 17(1)(7) Clause 1 of the Act, wife is only entitled to claim a right to residence in a shared household, and a shared household would only mean the house belonging to or taken on rent by the husband, or the house which belongs to the joint family of which the husband is a member. In the case, the property in question neither belonged to the husband, nor it was taken on rent by him, nor it was a joint family property of which husband was a member. Hence, it was the exclusive property of mother of husband and not be termed as a shared household. Now, the question comes, against whom can the complaint be filed? As we discussed in our previous discussion, that a respondent. Now, what do you mean by respondent? What we called as a respondent? Section 2 Clause Q has defined in a very simple words that any adult male person who is or has been in a domestic relationship with the aggrieved person and against whom the aggrieved person has sought any relief under this act, provided, this is what is called as a, we call this as a proviso clause. When anything is related with provided, it means it's a proviso clause. What does it say? It says an aggrieved wife or female living in a relationship in the nature of marriage may also file a complaint against a relative of the husband or the male partner. So, in view of the definition of the term respondent covering adult male person, the judiciary has time and again been confronted with the argument that an aggrieved person can file a complaint under this act against an adult male person only and not against the female relatives of the husband, which has been later on been get it amended, and various judgments has been talked about regarding who will be called as a respondent. However, the Supreme Court in the case of Sandhya Venkade, which I just referred before in my discussion, versus Manoj Bhimrao, put rest the issue of holding that the proviso to Section 2 Clause Q does not exclude the female relatives of the husband or male partner from the ambit of complaint that can be made under the provision of this act. So this case has clarified the definition of the respondent. Now, what are the duty of courts? We have understood who can file the complaint. We have understood against whom we can file a complaint. Now, what is the duty of the courts while deciding the cases under the Domestic Violence Act? There is a judgment in 2006 of Supreme Court which has elucidated the duty of courts while deciding the complaints. The case is Krishna Bhattacharya versus Sarthi Chaudhary and another. It had stated that it is the duty of the court to scrutinize the facts from all angles, whether a plea advanced by the respondent to nullify the grievance of the aggrieved person is really legally sound and correct. Second, the principle justice to the cause is equivalent to the salt of ocean should be kept in mind. The court of law is bound to uphold the truth which sparkles when justice is done. Third, before throwing a petition at the threshold, it is obligatory to see that the person aggrieved under such a legislation is not faced with a situation of non-adjudication for the 2005 Act, as we have stated, is a beneficial as well as assertively affirmative enactment for the realization of the constitutional rights of women and to ensure that they do not become victims of any kind of domestic violence. That's what I just spoke before, that Article 15 Clause 3 makes sure that the state shall make provisions, special provisions for women and children. And this act is the result of this particular article. Now, we have understood what are the duties of court, how the court has to act upon the complaint. Now, the question arises, what are the form and manner of making complaint? How to file a complaint? How to make a complaint? For this, there is a rules which has been come, that is domestic violence rules, which says that the forms, complaints and the applications under this act can be made by filing in the prescribed forms. The forms can be availed of from any sources including service providers, protection officers or police stations. Second, the aggrieved person has a right to seek assistance for filing these forms or filing the applications before the court. Third, the aggrieved person can also file the complaint or applications directly before the court. It is not necessary that the complainant or the aggrieved person has to first approach protection officer. It is not mandatory. The aggrieved person can also file the complaint or the applications directly before the court. There is a very important judgment of Delhi High Court which was passed, which says that the DIR, that is the domestic incident report, is not mandatory to file a complaint before. It is not mandatory to file along with the complaint or application. I'll discuss with this case later on. A next point that needs to be keep into mind is once the aggrieved person has filed the complaint, she has a right to receive a copy of complaint or the applications free of cost. The service of the notice or summons shall be by handing over the same to the respondent or any male member of his family. Once the summons or the notice delivered by the registered post, court can direct service in accordance with Code of Criminal Procedure or CPC or employ any other effective way of service in view of the facts and circumstance of the court. Now, what are the procedures involved under this act? There are certain steps. I'll be referring to certain steps which are involved under this act. First step, informing the protection officer. Any person who has a reason to believe that such an act has taken place or is likely to take place can inform the protection officer. Second step, aggrieved woman should be informed of her rights under the law, meaning thereby a police officer, a protection officer, service provider or a magistrate who has received a complaint shall inform her about the court procedures. Third, her right to make an application for obtaining relief by way of protection order or an order of monetary relief, a custody order or a residence order or a compensation order. These are the reliefs are being provided under this act. Next, the availability of services of the protection officers, service providers including shelter homes, medical facilities, etc. Her right to free legal services under Legal Services Authority Act 1987 and her right to file a complaint under Section 498 of the Indian Penal Code. Next step, making the domestic incident report and other responsibilities of the protection officer. The protection officer makes a DIR to the magistrate and forward the copies thereof to the concerned police officer in charge. She or he ensures that the aggrieved person gets all the benefits mentioned in the DIR report. A list of all service providers is maintained and that the aggrieved person has access to counseling, shelter homes and other medical facilities where required. Once the matter is with magistrate, the next step comes into existence. What is that? The magistrate shall fix the first date of hearing, which shall not ordinarily be beyond 3 days. This is the days which are mentioned in the act, that is not ordinarily beyond 3 days from the receipt of application by the court, and shall endeavour to dispose every application made under this act within a period of 60 days from the date of first hearing. Next step, informing the respondent about the date of hearing. How? By serving a summons or a notice. Next, other options with the magistrate. What magistrate does? The magistrate may direct either of the parties singly or jointly to undergo counseling, seek assistance of a person, preferably a woman, engaged in promotion of family welfare for assisting him or her in discharging his or her functions, or conduct the proceedings in camera. Now next step comes, where does she stay in the meantime? Aggrieved person has the right to reside in a shared household, which I just talked about it. What is the meaning of shared household? Whether or not she has any right, title or beneficial interest in the house and shall not be evicted. Next step, how is she protected in the interim? Interim means before the disposal of the petition. In between that time, how is she protected? The magistrate, after giving both parties an opportunity of being heard and satisfied that domestic violence has taken place, can pass a protection order or a residence order and direct the respondent to pay the aggrieved person a monetary relief. In addition, can pass a compensation orders, custody orders and ex parte orders. The magistrate shall ensure that the copy of any such order shall be given free of cost to the parties. Now, what happens if the protection order is breached or not been followed by the respondent? Then in that case, if the protection order has been breached, it shall be punished with either imprisonment or fine or both. Now, following are the reliefs an aggrieved person can seek, as in protection order, order for monetary relief, custody order, residence order, compensation order, any of the aforesaid order. These are the reliefs is provided to the aggrieved person. Now, as I was discussing, women in live-in relationship. Now, whether a woman in a live-in relationship is covered under this act? Yes. A wider meaning to an aggrieved person under Section 2A of the Domestic Violence Act was conferred by the Supreme Court in the very famous case D. Veluswamy versus D. Patachanammal 2010. This is the 2010 judgment of Supreme Court, which has enumerated 5 ingredients of a live-in relationship, which are as follows. First, both the parties must behave as husband and wife and are recognized as husband and wife in front of society. Second, they must be of a valid legal age of marriage. Third, they should qualify to enter into a marriage. For example, none of the partners should have a spouse living at the time of entering into such relationship. Fourth, they must have voluntarily cohabited for a significant period of time. Fifth, they must have lived together in a shared household. The Supreme Court further observed in the same case that not all live-in relationship will amount to a relationship in the nature of marriage to get the benefit of Domestic Violence Act. To get such benefit, the conditions which are mentioned above shall be fulfilled, and this has to be proved by the cogent and valid evidence. So friends, I tried to cover the various aspects of this topic. You all are welcome to give me your comments or suggestions if any, and if anyone require any citation of the judgment which I quoted in my discussion, please message me below and I will revert back at the earliest. Thank you all. Stay home and stay safe.